when basic training was over, we got to go to certain schools, and so I asked to go to the clerical school because I typed really well, so I spent time there, and that allowed me to be of quite good fortune later on. Then we were assigned to an organization. It was the 750th Tank Battalion. And so I would go out with training with them. Now this is a picture of basic training company. My picture is in the middle, and I think maybe you might identify it. So after I had gone to this school, then they assigned me to the company clerk for a company in the 750th Tank Battalion. Well, I loved that, you know, and so on and so forth. Well, as training progressed, my bunk was right next to a person from Mississippi, and he was a Mississippi hillbilly, and you know, a wonderful sharpshooter and so on and so forth. And every night he loved beer, and so he was down, and we'd go down and drink beer. But when he got back, he would of course sit on the side of his bed and sing to himself rather quietly. And then when he was about ready for bed, he'd reach over and he'd say, "Weston, are you okay?" And I'd say, "Yes, Jesse, I'm fine." "Well, that's just fine." And then he would go to bed. So we became pretty fast friends. Jesse and I became good friends. Well, he was a wonderful sharpshooter. So when we went out then in basic training to shoot the Thompson submachine gun, that's where you go, brr, 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 you know, and whatever target pops up. Well, Jesse liked beer, and I didn't drink beer in those days. Well, I still don't, but anyway. So I said to Jesse, "Now, Jesse, I'll bet I beat you." And Jesse said, "Well, okay, I'll take you up on that." So I got done, and I finished, and I came back, and I said, "Jesse, how'd you do?" And I said, "Oh, just great." So he went through, "How'd you do?" I said to him, "Oh, terrible." Well, so the next night, we are lined up for retreat, and the company commander said, "The scores from this shooting on the range yesterday are just outstanding." And he said, "I'm so proud of this company." And he read the names of the different categories of sharpshooter and all that sort of thing. But said, "But we have 2 scores here that are just quite unbelievable." He said, "Here's one of 98 out of 100. That may be the first time that we've had that." So he said, "Well, Corporal Jesse O'Few, please come forward." So Jesse goes out and gets it pinned, and everybody expected that, you know, they didn't think it. But he said, "That's not the end of it. We've got one that got 99 out of 100. And everybody was kind of waiting, and they said, "Will Corporal Weston Noble please step forward?" I went up there, and I couldn't help but laugh, because I just knew I hadn't gotten that, especially when the company commander said, "Now we'll all go down to the PX and drink beer." Well, now this sort of leads into something, because then when we went overseas, and we went over in a large civilian transport ship, but we were 8 high, the bunks were. Mine happened to be about number 4 or 5, so that wasn't so bad. Then when it came to our first day in combat, and by that time, so we landed in Normandy where the invasion was, but this was in September, and the invasion was in June. We had worked our way to Belgium and Holland. And our orders were that we were to go hold this hill. And I remember thinking that the infantry would be right with us. And I looked out there, and this infantryman was walking along that. Boy, am I glad I'm in a tank. You know, I really can protect it. Well, it didn't take very long in combat to know that he was the lucky one, because he could run and hide behind a tree. And here I am in this noisy contraption that everybody could hear at any place, you know. So we went to this hill, and we were just to stay there, and so on and so forth. But then the word reached us that the infantry had pulled back. So what were we going to do? So they decided they'd make a break for it and try to get out of there. So we started up our engines and so forth, but we quickly turned them off because the Germans then knew immediately where we were. So Jesse's in the driver's seat. I'm in the assistant driver's seat. And Jesse said, well, I think it's time for you to stand up and open the door. You don't have to get out, but watch. And so, of course, the fence posts move and the trees move, you know. And so I sat down and closed the top. And Jesse said, Weston, are you scared? And I said, oh, Jesse, yes, I am. I'm really scared. Well, shall I sing to you? And he sang hillbilly songs to me for about the next 2 hours. And I've fallen in love with hillbilly music. That relationship meant so much to me. So I would estimate maybe 15 years ago, but that's not very long ago as far as the war is concerned. The phone rang. Hello, Weston? Yes. This is Jesse. Jesse, really? And we just had kind of a little nice conversation. And I said, well, he says, I just had to call you and find out how you were. And so I thanked him and so forth. And do you know, he died the next week. Just gets me even yet to think that that meant that much to him, and he had no idea how much he meant to me, see. Aachen, Germany is right next to the border. And aren't you a history major? Mm-hmm. Well, Aix-la-Chapelle was the name of Aachen at that time, and that's where they crowned the Holy Roman Emperor at that time. And so the Germans were really fighting like crazy because they didn't want to give up their territory. And so we were really heavy in that battle. I found myself in a hotel, and I saw all this silver service for tea, demitasse, and things like that, you know, and I thought, gee, that'd make a nice souvenir, you know. So I picked it up and put it in my duffel bag. And when I came home eventually, and I showed this to my mother, thinking she'd be kind of thrilled to have something like this, and she says, Weston, I never thought you would steal. Well, I'm glad she looked at it that way, but we started to push our way across. That's when I got my first Purple Heart. I'm proud of it, of course, but it wasn't any great valor or anything, but I was grabbing hold of the casing of a shell that we'd fired, and it was so hot, and it really burned my hands. And I said something about that in a letter that I sent home, and I learned a lot, because then all my family, oh, I was a piano major at Luther, what's he done to his hands, and so on and so forth. We hated what we called the 88, and our tanks had 50 millimeter guns and 75 millimeter guns. And the Germans had this 88, and it was on wheels. So it could be anti-personnel, it could be anti-tank, and it could be anti-aircraft. And if your tank was struck by an 88 shell, it would go right through it. And so it was just, everybody was killed or maimed or something like that. So we really hated those. If we made a mile a day, we thought it was a good day in a sense, so to speak. But we were about ready to take off and to take Cologne. And Cologne, Germany has this huge Gothic cathedral and so forth. We're laying down the artillery barrage where we were going to cross the river. And the artillery fire was so bright I could read a newspaper. And I'm in a room. Well, that morning, all of a sudden, the firing stopped. And the word came to us that the Germans had broken through in Belgium. That's what we called the Battle of the Bulge. We packed up everything we possibly could, and it was just before Christmas. Well, I'm sort of that sentimental type that I didn't want to open what gifts they'd gotten until Christmas. And they said, get rid of those gifts. And one was a can of pineapple juice. So I thought, well, I might just as well drink the whole can. It probably was 15 years before I could face another can of pineapple juice. When we got down to Germany, if Point A, the first vehicle of a battalion or a division, would leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, the last vehicle would go through at 4 in the afternoon. That's how big it was. So we get down there, and it was just chaos. Well, it was just chaos. We would try to follow our maps and so forth, and we wouldn't get to the right place. Well, the Germans had picked out people of their soldiers that spoke perfect English. And so they dressed them up as military police and then assigned them at bridges and highways and so forth. And what they do? They turned all the signs around all the way. And so that's why it was just absolute chaos. So that was a pretty tough experience.